Okay, I think we're gonna talk because it starts with a little bit the Agadata, and on Daf Yud Aleph. So the Gemara brings the psiches. There are 11 psiches, to the Megilas Esther. But the various, it was one Tana and 10 Amoraim that introduced certain hayakov, that introduced certain psiches to the Megilas Esther. Okay, and here the Gemara says Rabbi Yonason. Rabbi Yonason was a Tana. He was a late Tana. He lived very, very long, and is that come sit down, come. Sit next to Mati. Go sit next to Mati. Okay. No, go sit next to Mati. Okay. Rabbi Yonason posach la pischa lahai pashata mehacha. That it means that when he began to learn the Megilas Esther, he gave this as a the psichas and the hakdama. And he brought the posuk in Yeshaya that Hashem said, "V'kamtei aleihem nu'um Hashem." When he was speaking about the ultimate downfall of Bavel, there's "V'kamtei aleihem nu'um Hashem," that Hashem said that I will rise up against them. V'ichrati leBavel sheim v'sheir nin v'nechet nu'um Hashem. And he said, then I'm going to eliminate, chorus, the shame, the name, she'er, nin v'nechet. And there are 4 aspects of Bavel that are going to be eliminated. So Rabbi Yonason said the shame is zehaksav, because he said that the ksav of Bavel is like a cuneiform kind of ksav. It's not an alphabet like we have, and that ksav it was really lost. Okay. So he said that ksav is lost. She'er zeh the loshen that they spoke in, although the Aramis that they spoke in Bavel we still have, we have in the Gemara, but nevertheless the language, Tosha says that there was a language that the royalty used, whatever, that language is eliminated. Nin is zeh malchus. It means that the dynasty of Nebuchadnezzar, because Nebuchadnezzar had a son, Evil Moraldach, and then he had a grandson who was the father of Vashti Belshazzar. And after Belshazzar was killed, there was no more dynasty of Bavel. The Neched and Zuvashti. And that refers, the Neched means that the Richrati, that finally Bavel is going to be totally eliminated when Vashti is killed. Okay? So then, so now just remember for a moment that the shame is the loshen, that the language was eliminated. It's not used anymore. It was forgotten. Okay. Reb Shmuel bar Nachmeni pasach la pischa lahai pashata mehacha. Reb Shmuel bar Nachmeni, who was the Talmud of Reb Yonason. The Rashi says in several places in Psachim and Shabbos and Bava Basra that Reb Shmuel bar Nachmeni was one of the earlier Amoraim, and he was a Talmud of Reb Yonason, who was one of the later Tanoim. Right, so Reb Shmuel bar Nachmeni pasach lepischa lahai pashata mehacha, that he introduced the Megillah with the following pasuk: Tachas hanatzutz yale berosh. The natzutz is like a bramble, right? There will be a beautiful cedar tree. V'tachas hasirpod, the sirpod is like a thorn bush. Yale hadas will grow in its place a hadas. Tachas hanatzutz yale tachas homen arosha. I'm going to skip a little bit. Is Yale Beroza Mordechai, that Mordechai was the cedar that replaced Haman, who was the bramble. Okay, and then it says Tachas HaSirpod. The sirpod is like the weed. Is Tachas Vashti Arasha Bas Benosh of Nebuchadnezzar Arasha. Vashti was the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar, right? So Yale Hadas, the Hadas is going to grow in its place. And the Hadas is Esther, who was called Hadassah, right? And then the pasuk ends. This is the pasuk from the Haftarah of the Shtana Sibba, that V'hoya Lashem L'Shem Zu Mikra Megillah Lo Olam Lo Yikores Elu Lo Yemei Purim. That says V'hoya Lashem L'Shem, that it will. V'hoyel Hashem l'shem, that it will remain as a shame for Hashem, and that remain. What is the shame? That is a prophecy of Mikra Megillah. Lo is olam lo yikares elu yemei Purim. So after all of this, Mordechai is going to replace Haman, and Esther is going to replace Vashti. V'hoyel Hashem l'shem. That's the Mikra Megillah, and Ois Olam Lo Yikares, that's the Yemei Purim. Okay, it's interesting. The Ein Yaakov has the gears exactly the opposite. It says V'hoyel Hashem l'shem, that is the Yemei Purim, and La'os Olam Lo Yikares, that is the Mikra Megillah. That's the Megillah. Okay, now a few years ago we discussed the difference between the two Girsos, and if we have time, and we'll touch upon it a little bit of a different aspect. But here, remember I mentioned to you before that Rab Shmuel bar Nachmani was the Talmud of Rabbi Yonasan, right? And Rabbi Yonasan said, "Vichrati leBavel shame." He says that Hashem said that he told through the Novi Yeshai, he said that he's going to eliminate the shame from Bavel. What is the shame? And so the Gemara says, Rabbi Yonasan said that's the Loshen, right? That the Loshen of Bavel is forgotten, more or less. Okay, it's hard even when you find in excavations, archaeology, and you find inscriptions. It's very, very difficult to even to even decipher what it means. Okay, because the shame that's gone. All right, okay, that's the shame. All right. So Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani, we said, was the Talmud of Rabbi Yonasan. And therefore, when he goes through and he says that Mordechai will replace Haman, Esther will replace Vashti, in V'hoyel Hashem l'shem la'os olam lo yikares, V'hoyel Hashem l'shem is the Megillah, la'os olam lo yikares is the Yemei Purim, right? Okay, not the other way around, that the shame is the Megillah. I'm sorry, is Purim, and Ois Olam is the Yom Tov, not that way. But it says V'hoyel Hashem l'shem, that the shame is the Megillah. Okay. Now, why is that? It's because we said that Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani was the Talmud of Rabbi Yonasan, and Rabbi Yonasan said Vichrati leBavel shame. What is Vichrati leBavel shame? It means that the Loshen of Bavel, the language that they speak, is going to be eliminated. Right. They're not going to speak anymore. The shame is the ksav. Actually, the Gemara says the ksav. It's the ksav of Bavel. So therefore, when it says that the ksav of Bavel is going to be eliminated, and therefore there's difficulty, you can't even decipher the inscriptions on the archaeology sites anymore, because the shame, the ksav of Bavel, is eliminated. No one knows it anymore. So therefore, Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani, who was a Talmud of Rabbi Yonasan, says V'hoyel Hashem l'shem refers to another ksav, the ksav of the Mikra Megillah. Just like the ksav that Rabbi Yonasan said is going to be eliminated is the ksav of Bavel, Vichrati leBavel shame, which is the ksav of Bavel. So Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani's Talmud, when he had a darshan V'hoyel Hashem l'shem, that after all of this V'hoyel Hashem l'shem, the shame that we're referring to here is the shem of the Megillah, right? Which is ksav. All right. Okay. So here, the Gemara brings in Daf Yud Beis. The Gemara says that Shalo Talmidav es Reb Shimon ben Yochai. The Talmidim es Reb Shimon ben Yochai mipnei ma nischai b'saneim shel Yisrael sheba'os sadar kloya. Why? What was the chet that was so great that at that time the Klal Yisrael was chayav kloya, right? Amalehem imru atem. What do you think? Okay. Now here the Mefarshim speak about in great detail. Well, what did he think? If they knew, why did they ask? But he said, Imratem. We'll try to clarify it in a moment. Because they went and they partook of Achashverosh's Mishta. So Amrulo, so they said to him, In Kain shebeshushan yahagu, shebechol ha'olam kula al yahagu. He said, if so, why should the Jews all over the empire, why should they all be punished? It would be enough that the Yidden in Shushan should be punished, right? So, Amrulo Amorato, he said, okay, So what do you say? You don't like our suggestion? Because they worship the tzelem of Nebuchadnezzar. All right. If so, that was avodah zarah. How could they be forgiven? Okay. They didn't do it ma'ava, they didn't do it merotzen, they did it me'ira. So therefore Hashem understood that it wasn't berotzen, and therefore He allowed them to have kapara through the fear. They did it because of fear, so therefore they were forced. They were like pushed to the brink, and that fear they did tshuva, and that was mechapa. Okay. Now, let's go back a little bit to understand this maimah. The Gemara in Daf Zayin, the Gemara tells us that there was, you remember that there was the dialogue, that even you see it, even in the psukim of the Megillah, you see that there was a dialogue between Esther and Mordechai and the Anshe Knesses Hagdola, which included the last of the Nevi'im, Chag, Zechariah, and Malachi. And at one point Esther said, Kivuna Ledoros, she wanted Purim to be established as a Yom Tov. And they were very reluctant to do it because they said, Kinat Moraras Aleinu, because what are you going to do? You're going to be Ma'or Kinna. Every year we're going to celebrate what we were able to overcome, Asher Yishlutu Yehuda Meima B'Saneim, and it's going to just generate more ill will and anti-Semitism. So she said it doesn't matter anyway because all of this is recorded. Okay, that was one thing. Now, the Kivuni Ledoros was the Yom Tov of Purim, the celebration of Purim, and it could have even been reading the Megillah, right? But then, later on, a few lines later, the Gemara says that Esther had another request, that Sholchalam Esther lechachamim kisvuni ledoros. She asks that I should be written for eternity. Now, what does that mean? It means that the Megilas Esther should be part of the Tanakh. And the Megilas Esther was the last of the 24 Svarim to be included in the Tanakh. That she said to Tisuni Ledoros, write me, record me, Ledoros, and I want to be part of the Tanakh. So they sent her the following. Halo Apostle and Mishlei, Halo Kasavti Locha Shalishim, that the Novi says that Hashem says, Shlomo Melech actually said, that that I wrote 3 times. Now, what does that mean? I wrote to you 3 times. Shalishim velo revim, 3 times and not 4 times. And the Anshe Knesset Hagdola understood that this referred to the Inyan of Mechias Amalek, and they said that there are 3 places where Mechias Amalek is mentioned. In Beshalach, Vayova Amalek, and in Kisitza Zachar Ma Eisa Sha'asol Amalek, and then the Haftarah in Shmuel that Pakadete Eisa Sha'asol Amalek. So Shlomo Melech said to the Koach of Nevuah, he said, Haloi Kasavti Lecha Shalishim. I wrote 3 places in the Tanakh where Mechias Amalek is to be mentioned, and Velo Reviyah, but not a 4th. So because of that, they took this as a nevuah, and they saw that this was somehow to restrict any more inclusion in the Tanakh regarding the Mechias Amalek, which would kind of eliminate the Megillah. Okay, so the Gemara goes on and says, and the Yerushalmi, you have this in it's a little bit different form. Ad shemotzu lo mikra kosu b'Torah, until they found a pasuk in the Torah that seemed to indicate that the Shalishim v'lo Revim didn't eliminate Megilas Esther. Ksov zo zikaron b'sefer, because Hashem, after the Maisa of the Milchemes Amalek, Hashem said, Ksov zo zikoran b'sefer, v'sim bozne Yoshua. So it's Ksov zo zikoran b'sefer, Ksov zos masha kosov kan. Write the history of what happened at the time of Vayova Amalek, right? When Amalek came, record that. And also Uve Mishnah Torah. In other words, that the Ksov Zos means that Milchemes Amalek should be recorded in the Torah in two places. Before, where the Gemara was understanding, the Anshe Knas Agdola wanted to understand that Beshalach and Kiseitse are two separate, right, zichronos of Mechias Amalek. Now he says, no, Ksov Zos, a Sefer. Ksov refers to everything that's written in the Torah, both in Beshalach and in Kiseitse, and that's one. And Zikaron is Masha Kosuv B'Neviim. That refers to what we're going to read, Shabbos the Haftarah of Pakadati Eis Asher Osu L'cha Amalek, right? Okay? And it's interesting, it's not really what we're going to get into today, but it says that Zikaron Masha Kosuv B'Neviim. Zikaron is what it says in Shmuel, the Maisa where Shaul was commanded by Shmuel HaNovi to go and to eliminate Amalek, right? And how does the Haftarah start? How to be Pakadati Eis Asher Osu L'cha Amalek, right? Pakadati Eis Asher Osu L'cha Amalek. What does Pakadati mean? I remembered, right? Okay, so you remember by the Gemara Rosh Hashanah is a machloikus if pakdonos are kezichronos or not, because we have to say 10 psukim of zichronos that mention the word somehow as zichron, right? Zecher. Okay, so it's a machloikus in Gemara if pakdonos are kezichronos or not. If you would say a pasuk that has the word pakod pakadati eschem, right? Would you be yotze zichronos with that? And we paskin the pakdonos are zichronos, right? Because pakod and zichor are the same. The meaning is essentially the same. So therefore, when it says when they dash now, zikaron is mashakosu b'neviim, it means when it says pakadati eis asher osu l'cha amalek, right? That pakadati is a zikaron because pakdonos are zichronos, right? So that's what. And then Basefer Mashakos, what?
Now you have the third time.
Right, and now you have the word Basefer is available. It's free. It's ponui, and Basefer Mashakosov Megilah, and that refers to what it says, what's written in Megilas Esther. So now what did the Chachamim after, and the Yerushalmi is more specific. It says that there were 80 Zekanim and Mehem Kamen Neviim, and they were Nosim Badova Ad Shemotza Mikram and Atayra until they were able to legitimize the Megillas Esther, because originally the original thought was Shalishim and Veloy Revim, right? That Megillas Esther has no mokum. Right? It has no mokum in the Tanakh. It's not more than a story, right? And then they found Ksov Zos Zikaron Basefer, that Basefer refers to the Megillas Esther, and it has a place in the Tanakh. And al pi that, they took it into the Tanakh. Okay. So now the Gemara says that is Ketanoi. It's Ketanoi. This is a Machlokas Tanoim. Ksov Zos Masha Kosuv Kan, Zikaron Masha Kosuv Mishnah Torah, Basefer Masha Kosuv B'Neviim, Divrei Rabbi Yeshua. That Rabbi Yeshua holds as the original Salkadatach was, that Shalishim v'lo Reveim, that there's no mokum for the Megillas Esther. It wasn't intended to be included in Tanakh, okay? And essentially it means it wasn't Beruach HaKodesh, and it doesn't belong in the Tanakh, okay? Now, does that mean it should be read on Purim or not be read? We'll see. Okay, but Rebbe Lazar Hamadoi, who was also in the time of Rabbi Yeshua, was also from the Talmidim of Rabbi Yochanan and Ben Zakkai. He says, "No ksov zos zikaron basefer ksov zos mashakosuv kan," right? Uve Mishnah Torah. He says that the ksov refers to what's written in Beshalach and in Kiseitse, everything in the Torah is one, and zikaron mashakosuv b'Neviim in Shmuel. And Basefer Mashakosuv b'Megillah. Okay, fine. Okay, so Rabbi Lazar Madoi held like Esther and Mordechai that the Megillas Esther was worthy of inclusion in the Tanakh, and Rabbi Yeshua held like the original response of the Anshe Knesset Hagdola that Shalishim Veloy Revoyim, that it doesn't belong in the Tanakh. Okay, fine. Let's see for a moment. You see here's the pasuk in Mishlei that Haloi Kasavti Lecha Shalishim b'Mo'etzos V'das. Right now, that I wrote to 3 times, and the original response of the Anshe Knesset Hagdola was Shalishim V'lo Reveim, that no, there's no place for Megilas Esther because it's limited to 3 places: B'Shalach, Kiseitze, and Shmuel Anovi, not more, right? Okay, so then this is how I want to explain the pasuk, but the pasuk for which the Gemara doesn't bring, it says b'mo'etzos v'das, right? What does b'mo'etzos means? What does the mo'etzos means? Council and das. Where people contribute and shuas b'ravioitz, you have more people talking and discussing and learning, so you come out. Okay, so it says that haloi kasavti l'cha shalishim. There's an asnachta, the pasuk. Okay, and the Anshe Knesset Hagdola interpreted that at first meaning shalishim v'lo revim, that there's no place, there's no legitimacy for Megilas Esther in the Tanakh. But the pasuk, and Rabbi Yeshua held like that, but Rabbi Elazar HaMadoi understood not like that. He understood not like that. He says no, that Ksov is both B'Shalach and Kiseitze, and Zo's Zikaron is the Shmuel Pakadati, right? Because like I said before, that Pakdoinus are Kezichroinus, that's Pakadati is Zichroinus, and Baseifer is the Megilas Esther v'nichtov Baseifer, because that's what the v'nichtov Baseifer, right? How did we get that? Because the Asnachta is Shalishim, and they stopped there. The Anshe Knesset Hagdola originally and said Shalishim v'lo Revim, right? But the pasuk finishes b'mo'etzos v'das. When it says, like I told you in the Yerushalmi, that nosim v'nosim badava shmonim zekenim, that they sat for years and they struggled with this issue, and in the mo'etzos v'das, and they came together, the shuas berov yoetz, right? And they said, Lohadiacha koshet imre emes, to tell us, to tell you that the Megilas Esther, which is emes. Remember, because what is Megilas Esther? Megilas Esther is divrei shalom ve'emes, right? And we learn from divrei shalom ve'emes that the Megilas Esther has to have the sirtut, like in the Sefer Torah, right? So Memela, although the Gemara only brings that the Anshe Knesset Hagdola only learn the Reisha of the pasuk. They learn haloi kasavti l'cha shalishim. It's an asnachta, and they're lo revim, right? They can't go on. But later the mo'etzos v'das, when the Anshe Knesset Hagdola, when the Nevi'im, when the Anshe Knesset Hagdola sat and they sat and they really were meyageya themselves and samu leilos kayomim. And they came up, what the conclusion they came up was to teach the Klal Yisrael kosht divrei emes. That the truth is, because koshet is emes, right? Koshet is emes. And imre emes, to tell you that the Megillah, which is divrei shalom emes, does belong in the Tanakh. Okay? Fine. Okay. So now the Gemara goes on, and the Gemara brings another machlokes, that we know that from the Yud Ches Dover in Shabbos, we know that of the Yud Ches Dover is that the Kisvei Kodesh HaMetame Yodayim, right? Okay, Rabbi, it's a while ago since you learned it, but this is that the Yud Ches Dover is that the Kisvei Kodesh HaMetame Yodayim, and the reason for that is because the Chachamim were very, very concerned, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel were very, very concerned that the Kisvei HaKodesh be stored properly and not where the mice and the other rodents could come and eat away at the parchment. So therefore they were gozer tuma on the Kisvei Kodesh that they should not be stored near any food items. Okay, that was essentially what it is. Okay, so now it comes like this: that if you say that Kisvei Kodesh that are metame yadayim, and you say that haloi kasabti locha shalishim and esnachta, right? There's an esnachta, and it means shalishim and veloy revim. That it means Esther is not part of the Kisvei HaKodesh, it's not Matame Yodayim, right? If you say that no, that it says Vadas, and that the after the Shmonim, the Kenim, and the Kapman Nevi'im came to the conclusion that Esther is part of the Kisvei HaKodesh, right? Then it's Matame Yodayim. Okay. So the Gemara brings machloikes various tanoim whether or not Esther is Matame Yodayim, and it goes according to this. Exactly. If you say that Esther, that the Anshe Knas Hagdola, that their initial reaction was correct, and that Esther doesn't belong in the Kisvei HaKodesh, and there are only 23 books of the Tanakh and not 24, then it's not Matame Yodayim. If you say, however, that Esther, right, was included, but it says Vadas, right, that the Anshe Knas Hagdola and those that came, Rebbe Elazar Amadoi was right, and that it should be included, then Avad Esther is Matame Yodayim, there's another issue because Esther doesn't have the Shem Havaya. Okay, but that's not our sugya. Okay, so the Gemara says now the Gemara wants to know. So because Shmuel is the one who Dafke says that Esther is not Matame Yodayim. The Amor Shmuel, the Talmud Barabeinu HaKodesh, says that Esther is not in a Matame Yodayim. Right. So what does it mean? Because he held that Esther was not incorporated in the Tanakh. He held that Kasafti Locha Shalishim and Velo Revim, right? Evidently. Very good. Okay, he held like Rabbi Yeshua, as the Gemara is going to say. But the Gemara says, Lememra the Sova Shmuel Esther Lav Baruch HaKodesh Nemra. Does that mean that Shmuel holds that Esther wasn't Baruch HaKodesh? V'omer Shmuel Esther Baruch HaKodesh Nemra. We have another member of Shmuel where he says Beferish that Esther was said Beruach HaKodesh. If Esther was Beruach HaKodesh, so what does it mean that it belongs with the Tanakh? It's part of the Tanakh, and you didn't stop at their snachta. But Eitzos Vadas is right that Esther should be Ksov Zo Zikra Basefer means Megilas Esther, right? And therefore it was Beruach HaKodesh. Right? And it's Matame Yodayim. But Shmuel, who says that Esther isn't Matame Yodayim, so what does it mean? That he agrees with the original response of the Anshe Knas Hagdola that Shalishim v'lo Revim, right? But didn't Shmuel himself say that it's recorded here that Shmuel said that Esther was Baruch HaKodesh Nemra? So the Gemara says that yes, Nemra likros v'lo Nemra likosev. That Megilas Esther was Baruch HaKodesh, but the Ruach HaKodesh was that it should be read, but it didn't have to be written. Okay? Just bear with me for 1 minute. And on the top of the Omid, when it says Sholcha lahem Esther lachachamim, when she sent them and she asked him, because remember I said there were two bakoshes, kivuni ledoros, allow me to be a yontiv, establish my day as a yontiv, and then later kisvuni ledoros, and incorporate me into the Kisvei HaKodesh. So what does Rashi say that kivuni ledoros, right? Kivuni leyomtov, right? I should be celebrated as a yontiv, ulekriya, and to read, Lios L'Shem, and it should be remembered, right, that it should be called Megilas Esther, right? Okay, so here in the Kivuni Ledoros, you understand, in the Kivuni Ledoros, she asked that it should be Kriya even before the Gemara discusses the Kisvuni Ledoros, right? So that's what Shmuel says. Shmuel says that who tells you that the mitzvah of Kriyas HaMegillah has to be the Metoch HaKsav? Maybe just as Esther originally said Kivuni Ledoros, and when she said Kivuni Ledoros, at that time there was no thought even of writing Megilas Esther and bringing it into the Kisvei HaKodesh. Maybe it remained that way. That's the way that the Anshe Knas Hagdola held, because they held Shalishim v'lo Rivayim, Esnachta, and therefore, does that mean there's no Kriyas? No, there's a Kriyas HaMegillah, but there's a Kriyas HaMegillah Baal Peh. Like the Haggadah, maybe something like to remember the Nes, right? Like maskirin Yitzias Mitzrayim every day. There's no din that you have to be maskirin Yitzias Mitzrayim metoch Haksav, metoch Sefer Torah, right? So this would have been the same. Okay, fine, very good. And that's what Shmuel holds lemaskana, because Shmuel holds that Esther is Eina Metames Hayadayim, because he holds like Rabbi Yeshua, who agreed with the Anshe Knesset Hagdola that Esther didn't belong in the Kisvei HaKodesh because Shalishim Veloy Rebbeim, right? But nevertheless, it was Nemer Baruch HaKodesh that when Esther requested Kivunei L'Doros, that was accepted, and there was an Al Pi Ruach HaKodesh, there's a chiyuv every year to celebrate Purim and to read the Megillah, but you can read it Baal Peh. Fine, that's what the Gemara said in Shmos. For the Tosfos says very nice, but Shmuel was an Amora, right? He was from the greatest time. He was a Talmud Rabbeinu HaKodesh, but he was an Amora. No, doesn't the Mishnah say later on in Daf Yutes Beferish, the Mishnah says Koral Pez Lo Yotza? You can't read the Megillah Baal Peh. So how could Shmuel argue with the Mishnah? The Mishnah, and there aren't two opinions in the Mishnah. The Mishnah is very clear, Koral Peh Lo Yotza. So Shmuel says that, Tosfos explains rather, that Shmuel held, that Esther is not Metame Yodayim, and it really was never incorporated in the Kisvei HaKodesh. According to Shmuel, there are only really 23 books of the Tanakh. You read it with the tzivui of the Ruach HaKodesh, and later on, the Rabbonon were mesakin that Megilas Esther should be written. So when the Mishnah says that Koral Peh Lo Yotza, according to Shmuel, it means that the Rabbonon, the original takona of Purim, was that it could even be read Baal Peh because it's not part of the Kisvei HaKodesh, right? Okay? But in later generations, the Chachamim osu chizik l'divrayim, and the Chachamim instituted that it has to be written, right? Divrei Chachamim tzrich chizik, and that's why Koral Peh Lo Yotza. But midivrei Kabbalah, from the din of the Ruach HaKodesh originally, you could be mekayim the Megillas Esther even Baal Peh. Okay, and we don't paskin like Shmuel, obviously. All right, now. The Gemara says later on, how do we know? According to the Tanoim, who agree with Rebbe Eliezer Madoi, of whom very prominently is Reb Shimon ben Yochai, who we had before. Reb Shimon ben Yochai holds that Esther was Baruch HaKodesh Nemra, and he says that you don't stop by the Esnachta, but Mo'etzah is Vadas. He agrees with Rebbe Eliezer Madoi that Esther is part of the Kisvei HaKodesh, and it has to be, and therefore, to him, the Megillah has to be written Koral Peh Lo Yotza, even Medivrei Kabbalah, because the Anshe Knesset Hagdola came around and they were Mekabel Megillas Esther as the Tanakh, right? So the Gemara wants to but how does if Shmuel doesn't hold from that, right? Because if you hold like Reb Eliezer Madoi and you hold like Reb Shimon, not like Reb Yeshua, then Ksov Zikaron Basefer. You know very well that Esther is Baruch HaKodesh Nemra because it says Basefer, right? It says Basefer. The Torah. That. What more do you need than that? Ksov, right? Is B'Shalach and Kiseitse. Zikaron is Pokadete Sashosu Locha Molek, and Basefer is Megillas Esther. You don't need any other limit. That is the greatest testimony that Megillas Esther is Nemra Baruch HaKodesh. But the Gemara Shmuel, who doesn't hold that way, Shmuel says Esther is not Metame Yadayim. Shmuel held like Rabbi Yeshua that it was never incorporated into Tanakh. But yet he says that Esther was a Nemra Baruch HaKodesh. Where does he know it from? Zokta Kimu v'Kiblu HaYehudim. Right? Kimu v'Kiblu HaYehudim. Kimu lemata. Kimlo lemayla, mashi kimlo lemata. That min hashamayim they were maskim, and that Esther is Baruch HaKodesh Nemra because Kimu v'Kiblu HaYehudim Kimu lemata mashi Kimu lemala. Fine, okay, very good, very good. Okay, so Shmuel will hold that the Kriyas HaMegillah mitoch HaKsav mitoch HaMegillah with all the dinim, the stringent dinim, that Megillah has the din of Sefer Torah almost. There are only certain minor exceptions because it's called Igeres as well. But the Megillah Be'etzim has to be written with all of the all of the specifics of Sefer Torah. Shmuel doesn't hold like that. He holds like Rabbi Yeshua. So he doesn't have a limit min Torah. He doesn't darshan b'sefer to teach me that Megilas Esther was written b'ruach hakodesh and has to be written. And so how does he know? Because Kimah v'Kibla Yudim. Okay, so now listen. This is also v'yisyatzu b'tachtis ahor and Shabbos and Daf Peches. Omer Rav Avdimi b'choma b'chasem melamed shekofu hakodesh baruch aleim esahar kegigas. That Hashem took the mountain and he suspended it over them. You know, the Omer lahemim atem mekablim haTorah mutav v'im lav shom tehei kvoraschem. And if not, you're finished, right? Okay, shom tehei kvoraschem. Okay, and again, this is I'm just whetting your appetite a little bit. So if you'll come on Purim, we'll discuss what the shom is, the shom. But I'll give you one little indication. What is the shom? That if you count from Nisan to the day that Haman to Yud Gimel Adar, the day of the Gezerah, it's 340 days. It's the 340th day of the year, which is the Gematria Shom. Understand? Okay? Omer Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Acha Bar Yaakov, Mekan Modor Rabbi Laraisa. Right? Come, Baruch, sit down here. Mekan Modor Rabbi Laraisa. So doesn't this exempt the Klal Yisrael from observing the Torah? Because Rashi explains very well. You compelled me. It was compulsion, right? Don't those of you that helped me out with the Gittin, don't you know? Isn't that the essential question that we ask? Are you prepared to give your wife the get without any coercion or compulsion, right? Isn't that the first question? Compulsion, right? Okay. No. So could there be a Kabbalah Satorah? Could there be a Kabbalah Satorah with compulsion? So he said, Mekan Modar Rabbi Laraisa, that Rashi says Yisrael will turn around and they'll say, we never accepted this, we were coerced. So what do you want from us? Right? Okay. You're right. Until the time of Achashverosh, the Kabbalah Satorah was very, very weak. It might have even been not binding. But b'mei Achashverosh, dichsiv kimu v'kiblu Yudim kimu ma shekiblu kvar, that they reaffirmed the Kabbalah Satorah, and from that point on, there was no question that the Kabbalah was a Kabbalah. Fine, okay, very good. So now, without going into because there's a discussion Tosis and Shabbos, Tosis in Megilah, we're learning essentially from the Kimu v'Kibla Yehudim. We have two drashas. One drasha Shmuel said in Megilah that although he doesn't accept that Megilas Esther was part of the Kisvei HaKodesh, and therefore it's not Metame Yodayim, he nevertheless maintains that Megilas Esther is Nema B'Ruach HaKodesh, albeit only to read and not to read it mitoch haksav, but it's required, right? Because kimu v'kiblu haYehudim, right? Kimu v'kiblu, right? Kiblu lamata, mashe kiblu lamala, that it was Beruach HaKodesh. Fine, okay. Here, however, the Gemara uses the kimu v'kiblu haYehudim for another drush altogether, to say that although the initial Kabbalah Satorah was coercion, right? They were forced, right? And therefore they really shouldn't be bound by the Kabbalah Satorah at that time, right? But nevertheless, they corrected this Bizman Achashverosh and Kima v'Kibla Yehudim, and Rashi says that it was Ma'ava Sanes, that the Kabbalah Satorah was Ma'ava at that time, and from that time on, there was no more Modar Rabbi Laraisa. Fine, okay, that's right. So now, let's go back for a moment. And we can very, very, very makatsa this. So, the one that says that the Megilas Esther was to be included in the Tanakh, Reb Elazar Modoi and Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, and the Rov of the Tanoim not like Rabbi Yeshua and Shmuel, right? They don't require a posuk to teach that it was Nemer Baruch HaKodesh, because for them it's Kamita Shel Torah. As I read the posuk here in the Novi, Halo Kasafti L'Choshalishim, and the Anshe Knesset Agdola wanted to stop there because of the Asnachta, and then they said in Reb Elazar Madoi and Reb Shimon ben Yochai, they thought, no, finish the posuk beyond B'moetzos Vodas, come together and deliberate, and you'll see that we'll come to the conclusion that no, that you're not limited, because the Torah says Ksov Zo Zikaron B'Sefer, and the word Sefer teaches you Megilas Esther. Lo diacha koshet imrei emes, to tell you that Megilas Esther, which is Divrei Shalom ve'emes, belongs in the Tanakh. No, so Memela, when the Gemara says that you learn that Esther is Baruch HaKodesh Nemer from Kimu v'Kibla Yehudim, that's according to Shmuel and Rabbi Yeshua, that they say that Esther isn't part of the Tanakh. And it was only Nemer Baruch HaKodesh to read and to recite Baal Peh. And only in later Doros, Tosfos said, did they institute that it be written. But the initial takona mitzvah of Megilas Esther was to read it Baal Peh. No, how do you know such a thing? How do you know such a thing? Where do you see it? Because as Kima v'Kibla Yudim, that there was a Ruach HaKodesh Sivoy that the Megilas Esther be at Al Koponim recited Baal Peh and Purim be celebrated, right? But according to Reb Shimon bar Yochai and Reb Elazar Hamadoi, they hold that the Pshuta Kamashon, the Pshuta Shamikl Ksov Zo Zikaron B'Sefer, that B'Sefer goes on Megilas Esther. So you don't need any raya that Megilas Esther was Baruch HaKodesh Nemra. So according to them, they use the Kima v'Kibla Yehudim to tell you that the Modo Rabba Laraisa stopped at the time of Achashverosh. That's what Tosfos says. It says Rava has a problem, Shmuel has a problem. Because if Shmuel learns that it was Baruch HaKodesh Nemra, how does he know that the Modo Rabba Laraisa ever ended? The Tosfos has an answer. But according to Reb Shimon ben Yochai and Reb Elazar Madoi, the problem doesn't arise even, because they never needed Kima v'Kibla Yudim to tell me that it was Baruch HaKodesh. They knew very obviously, because Ksov is Koren B'Sefer. The B'Sefer is the Divrei Shalom ve'emes, that it even needs Sirtut Kamita Shel Torah. So obviously it was Baruch HaKodesh Nemra. And the Yerushalmi says, and this sugya here in Daf Zayin is Rabbi Yonason also. And Rabbi Yonason, the Yerushalmi, says that it was given Messinai even. He dashes that it was given Messinai to Moshe Rabbeinu. So who needs? So there's no need for an extraneous limit to tell me that it was Nemer Baruch HaKodesh. Okay. So now the Halskop. Listen. It's late. Hine Baruch Es Hashem Kol Avdei Hashem Ha'omdim Bebeis Hashem Baleilos. It's a bracha miyuchedes, the one that stays up and the one that is willing to lose a little bit of sleep, to learn Torah. And he travels from the Lakewood, he travels from the 5 towns, he travels from Muncie, you understand, and he has to get up very early in the morning and spend the whole day in Brooklyn, right, running around and everything. And Hine Bachas Hashem, Kol Avdei Hashem, Hom Deveis Hashem Baleilos, right? Su Yedechem Kodesh V'Varchas Hashem, Yivarechach Hashem Etzion. Okay. Anyway, so now it comes out like this: that do we need the ruach, the Kima v'Kibla Yehudim for Ruach HaKodesh? According to Shmuel, yes. According to Reb Elazar Madoi and Reb Shimon ben Yochai, who say that Esther is Metame Yodayim because it was incorporated, it's part of the Tanakh, because Ksov Zikaron B'Sefer is Megilas Esther. So according to them, right? According to them, very, very simple. The Pshuta Shel Mikra tells me, Mikra Mole Diber HaKosev B'Sefer, that just as the Sefer Torah itself, Hamita Shel Torah is the Megillah, that it's part of the Tanakh, and Avada, all of the attendant dinim apply, right? It's Metame Yodayim and whatever else. And Avada, it's the initial, original Takona Megilas Esther was it has to be Metoch HaSefer. Not like Shmuel would say that it's only a Darabona Dikta Takona that was enacted later, right? So now, listen to this. Listen. And now, Shalu Talmidim es Reb Shimon ben Yochai mipnei man ischai v'saneim shel Yisrael sheba'oisa hador kloya. Right, that's what we started with. That they asked him, why ba'oisa hador? Why was there Why was there such a gezerah? Was it because of Nena Mesudas Shaloisa Rasha? Was it because of Shishtach v'Letzelem? But what is Sheba Oisa Hadar? What is Oisa Hadar? So it goes like this: that Reb Shimon ben Yochai doesn't learn from Kimo v'Kibla Yehudim that it was needed for Ruach HaKodesh. He doesn't learn, right? But Shmuel learns that Kimo v'Kibla Yehudim means to tell me that it was Baruch HaKodesh. So we don't know if Shmuel will agree with this whole drasha of Modar Rabba L'Raisa, because the drasha of Modar Rabba L'Raisa has to end with Kimo v'Kibla Yehudim, right? And that pasuk was used already. So we don't know even this whole sugya of Adime ben Chama and Rava and Hoda v'Kiblua, right? Because of Kimo, obviously it would seem Toisus is meyashida, but it would seem that on the surface that Shmuel doesn't hold like that, and Shmuel won't agree with the Modar Rabba L'Raisa, right? Because Shmuel needs the Kima v'Kibla Yudim to tell him to inform us that although the Megilas Esther is not to be written, but at least it's Baruch HaKodesh to be read, right? Okay, but so now this sugya here where Kima v'Kibla Yudim is like to really resolve the Modar Rabba, because the Modar Rabba Raisa until that time really was a pretext for them to evade the Kiyum Torah, right? And then Kima v'Kibla Yudim. No, finally we reaffirm the Kabbalah of Sinai, right? Okay, who holds that? Reb Shimon ben Yochai and Reb Elazar Modoi, right? Because they don't need the Kima v'Kibla for Ruach HaKodesh, so they have, it's ponui, it's available to be used that the Kima v'Kibla was to put an end to the Modar Rabba L'Raisa and Mekan ve'ele Chushbana, and from now on you're obligated because they were Mekabel be'Ava. Okay, so Memele, until the time of Achashverosh, until the time of Tzumo Alai and Leich Kenosis Kolai Yehudim, there was a Modar Rabba L'Raisa. They weren't held accountable. When did the Kima v'Kibla Yehudim occur? At the end of the Megillah, after the Tshuva, after the Maisa with Haman, the Mapola, and then the Megillah at the very end says Kima v'Kibla Yehudim, right? Until that time, there was Modar Rabba L'Raisa. Okay, so Memela, who holds this sugi of Modar Rabba L'Raisa? The one that doesn't hold like Shmuel. Shmuel we don't, because he needs the pasuk of Kima v'Kibla for Ruach HaKodesh. But the one that holds that Megilas Esther was besefer, it was Kamita Shel Torah, it's mamish like the Sefer Torah, and it was given Baruch HaKodesh, and it must be written with all the dinim of Sefer Torah. No, he doesn't need a posuk to tell me there was Baruch HaKodesh. He holds that there was Modar Rabba L'Raisa, and at the end result of the whole Geschichte of the Megillah was that Kima v'Kibla Yudim, Kiblu Masha Kiblu Kvar, they reaffirmed, right? And they reinstated the Kabbalah Satorah. Okay? So Memela, at the time of the Suda of Achashverosh, the Modar Rabba L'Raisa was still in effect, right? Because it was before the Kima v'Kibla Yudim. So Memela Shalu Talmidim es Reb Shimon ben Yochai. According to your shita, you Reb Shimon ben Yochai disagree with Rabbi Yeshua and Shmuel, and you hold that Megilas Esther is besefer. It's to be written besefer like the Sefer Torah Gufa, right? Memela, you have the Yudashin, the Modar Rabba L'Raisa, and the Kima v'Kiblu Masha Kiblu Kfar later on. But at the time of the Mishnah Achashverosh, there was still the Modar Rabba L'Raisa. So according to you, Mipnei Man is Chai v'Soneim Shel Yisrael. Okay? Because
Bois Hadar you want to stress.
What?
Bois Hadar you want to stress.
Bois Hadar, right? Bois Hadar, yeah, Bois Hadar, right? That's it. This little shikul isn't mine. The Baditchev Verov brings it from his father. They says that Shalu Talmidim that L'shitoscha Reb Shimon ben Yochai, you disagree with Shmuel and you hold that Megilas Esther was Beruach HaKodesh naturally because it says B'Sefer. It's like the Sefer Torah, and so you don't necessarily agree with the whole sugya of Shabbos of the Modar Rabba Laraisa. So for you, the Kima v'Kiblus Poshet, that after the Divrei Atzomes v'Zakosam and the Mapol of Haman Kima v'Kibla, but until that time there was Modar Rabba Laraisa. So if so, B'fnei Man Ischai v'Sonem Shel Yisol Shabbos Adar Kloya. Okay. So he himself said that Avodah Zarah was an exception to that, and Ishtachav L'Tzelem. That's what his answer was, because remember that Avodah Zarah was from the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. So it didn't really matter. The Modor Rabba Laraisa was of no relevance there. But that's the way that the Baditchev Rav brings from his father that the Mipnei Ma'anis Chayvus Saneim Shel Yisob Shabbos Hadar Kloya. Why? Because you hold that Megilas Esther is B'Sefer. You don't need Kima v'Kibla Yehudim for Ruach HaKodesh, right? You know it. So you have the Kima v'Kiblu HaYudim to tell me that Hodder Kiblu v'Me'ach HaShverish. That was only later. B'Shas the Mishnah, there was still the Modar Rabba Laraisa. So Mipnei Man is Chai v'Saneim Shel Yisrael. That's it. Okay? Now, that's the Kedushas Levi brings it from his father-in-law. But we said that the whole vikuach, the dialogue between Esther and Mordechai and the Anshe Knesset Gdola and Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, all really centered on the posuk in Mishlei Halo Kesavti Lecha Shalishim. And although no one says it, but I'm sure that this is what they mean. Halo Kesavti, it's in Chav Beis posuk Chav. Halo Kesavti Lecha Shalishim. Okay? And there's an esnachta there. So Memela, they held, the Anshe Knesset Gdola originally held that the esnachta, their shalisha, means that this is it. There's no that there's no room, place in the Tanakh for the Megilas Esther, right? Okay. But later on, the Moetzos, Moetzos is like the Moetzos Gedolah Torah, right? With Moetzos, they came together, and Shuas Barav Yoetz, and they came to the conclusion that no, that the Shalishim doesn't limit because it says Ksov Zikor and Basefer, and Memela, the next one, Lahodiacha Koshet Imrei Emes, that the Imrei Emes of the Megillah was Divrei Shalom Emes, belong in the Tanakh, right? Okay. So now, you see that the Anshe Knesset Gdola, and in the end, even beyond that, Rabbi Yeshua and Shmuel were unwilling, on the basis of this pasuk, to include the Megilas Esther in the Tanakh, right? Please drink something, please. And they evidently they could not be persuaded. So what was it that evidently and the pasuk b'ma'etzos, right? Ma'etzos means council, right? There was a convention, right? A rabbinic convention. They got together and each one presented his opinion, his position, and his objection, and Rabbi Yeshua and later Shmuel sustained Rabbi Yeshua's position. They refused to be convinced, right? They were obviously das yechidim, therefore obviously we don't pass it that way. But what was it that after all, Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Elazar Modoi came with a very, very potent argument that the Basefer alludes to the Megilas Esther. And what more do you need than that? You bring a pasuk, Moshe Rabbeinu is referring to Bishalach and Kiseitze Zochar Asher Asher Lecha Amalek, and Zikaron refers to Pakadate Asher Asher Lecha, and Basefer is Megillah. Why weren't they convinced? Listen, what it says in the end, the last Beraise in Pirkei Avos. Kol ma shebara HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'olama lo bara oel lechvodo. that whatever the Rebbeinu Shalom created is Baruch Elokeinu shebaranu lechvodo, right? It was lechvodo. Shenema kol hanikra b'shmi ulechvodi barosiv yotzativ afasisiv. He says whatever is l'shmi, lechvodi barosiv yotzativ. Barosi I created, yotzativ let's say I fashioned, asisiv I made it, right? And the Braisa finishes Hashem Yimloch Le'olam Voed. Here, the Medrash Shmuel says, in the end of Ovos, he says that it's known that B'Shas the Bria there were 4 olamas, and the 4 olamas are the word Abiyah. Abiyah renono is ba'ad mifolav. Abiyah means I will express. All right, I express myself. And Abiyah, the Oisius, Aleph, Beis, Yud, and Ayin. Abiyah is the Aleph is the Olam Atzilus, and the Beis is the Olam of Bria. The Yud is the Olam of Yetzira, and the Ayin is the Olam of Asiyah. The Olam of Atzilus, what is Atzilus? Which is obviously far beyond our grasp, but Atzilus is Eitzel. It's Eitzel, it's Atzilus. That is the Olam that's nearest to the Kisei HaKoved, whatever that is. Again, it defies our even our imagination. But the Atzilus is the Olam that we say, Mesharsav Shoalim Zelo Ze Aye Mekom Kevodoi. That the Meshasav Shoalim Zelo Ze Aye Mekom Kivod, they don't even the Meshasav, the Malachim, Malachei Rachamim Meshasai Elyon, that the Malachim, that the holiest of the Malachim, they Aye Mekom Kivod, because they don't have a Drisas Haregel in the Olam Atzilus, because it's Eitzel HaMizbeach, Eitzel, the Shechina Kadosh and the Kisei HaKoved. The Gemara says Chagiga, the Shiva Rekiyim. Right? Okay. Beyond that is the Olam Abriya. The Olam Abriya is the Olam, the Malachim were created from the Olam Abriya. And the Olam Abriya is also Bereshis Bara Elokim, right? That the Bria was B'midas Hadin, B'tchila Ola B'machshavta Livroisa B'midas Hadin, that Bria is the Midas Hadin, right? Okay? And that's also an olam that is really an olam of the Malachim, and emes the tzadikim, gedolim tzadikim, yosim malachi ashares, v'hine malachi elakim olim b'yardim bo, right? But Yaakov Avinu was greater than them, because it says that they came, the Malach Olam Yodim Bo, they came from up and down. They wanted to look at Yaakov Avinu because the Tzadikim, Gedolim Tzadikim, Yosem Malach, that's the Olam Abriya, which is the Olam HaMalachim, and the Olam of the Tzadikim, the Miyuchodim, the Tzadikim Gemurim, right? Okay. Then there's the Olam of Yetzira, Vayitzar Hashem Elokim, right? And the Olam of Yetzira is a lower form, that the Balei Chai were created in the Olam HaYetzira, Yotzer HaAdam, Asher Yotzer Es Adam B'Tzalmo, okay? And that, in that Olam, there's still a very, very, very potent Hashros HaShchina, right? And then below that, there's the Olam Asiyah. That's the Abiyah. Aleph, Beis, Yud, Ayin. The Olam Asiyah is the Olam, B'yom Asos Hashem Elokim Eretz V'Shamoyim. That at that time already, for the world to have a Kiyum, the Kavayochel had to be Meshatef, the Shem of Rachamim with the Shem of Din. Because otherwise the world couldn't have a Kiyum. And that's what the Medrash Shmuel says, that the posuk that the Tana brings is called Hanikra B'Shmi Ulechvoidi, which is the Olam of Atzilus, Barosiv the Olam of Bria, Yotzativ is the Olam Yetzira, and Af Asisiv. And Asisiv is Af Asisiv. What do you mean Af? Why is it Af Asisiv? because af is the lotion of charon af, anger. You remember that Haman said, af lo hevio Esther amalki mamelech, and af is a lotion of kas, and because of that brought about his mapola. The Nochash said to Chava afki amar alekim mikol eitz hagan, right? He posach ba'af, and he was lost. The Sar ha'oifim said, af ani b'chaloimi, right? Which is a lotion of af. So shloisha poschu ba'af, and they had mapolas, right? So Mamela zogt the Medrash Shmuel that when it says that Hanikra Bishmi is the Olam Atziyas, Lechvoidi Barosiv Yatsativ Afasisiv is the Olam Asiyah, which he says is the Roiv of the Chitzonim, because in the Olam Asiyah, the Nisyonis to serve Hashem and to be Mekayim the mitzvahs, and for a person to fulfill that tachlis for which he was placed in this world are very, very difficult. Right, the challenges are almost insurmountable. So Megilas af asisiv. That's why it's a lotion of af. The asiya is there's a lotion of af in asiya. Right? Okay. Right. So Memela, the Baditchev Rav Schusa Yogan Oleinu explains here in the Kedushas Levi. He has the Kedushas, for the Kedusha Rishoyna, Kedusha Shniya, Kedusha Shliyad, in the Biurim on the Yontiv of Purim. And he says that the Megilas Esther was a sipper of a neis that occurred in Chutz Loretz. And as I said there by Shalashudas the other day, it was a neis, or no, between Mincha and Marev, it was there yesterday, or Monday, that it was a geschichte that took place over a period of 12 years. And there is nothing, in turning the pages and reading the Pshuta Shamikra, there's nothing there which is out of the ordinary. There's a lot of palace intrigue, a lot of jealousy, right? But there's nothing really that goes beyond the scope of human nature. And that's what it is, right? So, Memele, the Anshe Knesses Haggadola held that the other Nisim in Tanakh belonged the Olam of Atzilus, the Olam of Bria, the Olam of Yetzira, because all of the Nisim in Tanakh were manifested to a greater, a lesser degree, a very, 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 very strong chutz l'derech hateva, lemala min hateva, right? Lemala min hateva. Whereas the Megilas Esther was beteva, there was nothing extraordinary about what happened in the Megilas Esther, right? And therefore the Shem Havaya doesn't even appear in the Megilas Esther, and therefore the Megilas Esther is relegated to the Olam Asiyah, on which it says, Noach lo la'odem shelo nivra mishenivra. Achshav shenivra yefashresh v'masav. But the Olam Asiyah, it's almost, the odds against a person, being a good person even, are almost insurmountable. So Memela, the Anshe Knesses Haggadola said, Hai koloi kasavte locho shalishim. That the Nisim, right, that can be explained, relevant to the three Olamas of Atzilus and Bria and Yetzira, those belong in the Tanakh. But a sipper, right, a historical occurrence which took place over a period of 12 years, which really had nothing in it that was extraordinary, nothing that was lemala min hateva, and is totally in the Olam Asiyah, which is the world in which we say really Noach lo la'odem shelo nivra, doesn't really belong in the Tanakh, because the Tanakh is all extraordinary, right? Avasenu sipru lanu pa'alte b'mei and b'mei kedem, right? And that, but the Megilas Esther isn't that. So the Anshe Knesses Haggadola and Rabbi Yeshua and Shmuel were adamant they refused to be convinced because they said that the Megilas Esther belongs to the Olam Asiyah, and the Olam Asiyah, that's the Olam that Noach lo Adam, right? Shelo nivra yosem shenivra. No, achshav shenivra yefashe. What can you do? But right. So Memela, they were adamant, and they said that it doesn't belong in the Tanakh, right? No. Until that, you know that Al Pi Arizal, you look in the Megilas, you learn the Megillah, and you see the Shem Havaya doesn't appear in the Megillah. Why? Because the Megilas Esther is the Olam Asiyah. The Olam Asiyah is Noach lo Adam Shelo Nivra, and Keilo the Kavayachol wasn't meyached his Shem on the Olam Asiyah. It had to only be Yom Asois Hashem Elokim. Yom Asois, you had to be Meshatev, even the Midas Harachamim, that the Olam should even have a Shvacha Kiyum. So Memela, they said the Shem Havaya doesn't appear in it. So how can it? That indicates that it doesn't belong to any of the Olamas other than the Olam Asiyah, and it's Chol, it's not Kodesh. The Memela, how can you bring it into the Tanakh? But Rebbe Lozer Modoi and the Nevi'im and the other of the Anshe Knesset Hagdola and Reb Shimon ben Yochai, they said no. They said no. Because if you look in Megilas Esther, it's not as if the Shem Havaya is absent totally. The Shem Havaya isn't Beferish, but the Shem Havaya is in Rosh Tevis and Sofer Tevis, right? It's in the Rosh Tevis and the Sofer Tevis, right? That what are Rosh Tevis and Sofer Tevis? Ani Rishon v'ani Achron. That although the nace happened in a way, it occurred in a way that that the Shem Havaya itself couldn't be included in the Megillah, but the Shem Havaya, the Yovoy HaMelech v'Homen Hayom, is the Rosh Tevis or the Shem Havaya. Ki Cholsa Elav Harames HaMelech, the Sofer Tevis of the Shem Havaya. So Memele said Ani Rishon v'Ani Achron, that the Kaviyachol said that Hashoichin Itam B'toich Tu Mosam, that the Megilas Esther is deserving and worthy of the Kisvei HaKodesh, because this is really what the Bria was all about, right? So Memele, the Anshe Knesset Hagdola and Mordechai and Esther and Rebbe Lozer Modoi and Reb Shimon ben Yochai said no. What was the reason that the Rebbeinu Shalom created the world? He created it for the Olam Asiyah, to give the human being to get an opportunity to elevate himself, to go mala, right? You remember Yom Kippur? We say the Avisa Tehillah, V'Ratzisa Shevach. Remember, V'Ratzisa Shevach goes in the Malachim. V'Avisa Tehillah, V'Hiti Lasecha. The whole piyut there describes how the Rabbeinu Shalom doesn't want the Malachim. He doesn't. What he wants is Mikerutze Chomer, Miglumegach, right? That it describes all the frailties and the weaknesses of the human being, and it ends V'Hiti Lasecha, right? So Memela, they said, Adrabe, the Olam Asiyah, where the Shem Havaya isn't even comfortable, right? Where the Shem Havaya only can be introduced in remez of Ani Rishon v'Ani Achron, right? That's Daka, that's why Anochim, that's where I belong. So Memela, that's what the Baditchev Rav says. I'm adding a little bit to it, the Bedra Shmuel, and a little bit of explanation, but that's essentially, that's what the Baditchev Rav says, that was why Rebbe Lozer Modoi and Reb Shimon bar Yochai and the Rov and Chagai, Zechariah, Malachai all disagreed with Rabbi Yeshua and the Anshe Knesset Hagdola's initial refusal to incorporate the Megilas Esther, because they said that only those nisim which were gluyim that pertain to the oilem of Atzilas, Bria, Yetzira, but Malakoim bebeis hakvaros, how can they? And they said no, Ani Rishon v'Ani Achron, that don't look at the Shem Havaya. The Shem Havaya is here, but what? But you have to find it, right? Okay. וביקשת משום es Hashem elekecha u'motzoso ki sidreshena b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha. And what is misham? Misham is the shame. Is mishem. That the Shem Havaya isn't here, but mishem, the mikzah Shem, the mishem, the vikashtem misham, the vikashtem mishem, that if you look at the Rosh Tevas and the Sofer Tevas, you'll find that the vikashtem misham u'motzoso. So Mamela, it belongs here in the Megilas Esther, belongs in the Tanakh. Okay? I'm going to tell you one more thing because it's late. There's a lot more to talk, but Mitzvah Hashem, Purim, you'll come back. What I'm looking for one thing now. I mentioned before that remember that I said before that V'hoyal Hashem la'ois la'olam la'hoyal Hashem la'Hashem la'ois olam la'yikares, right? And I said that V'hoyal Hashem la'Hashem is the Megilas Esther, la'ois olam la'yikares is the Yemei Purim, right? The Yaakov Dashen's Fakir V'hoyal Hashem l'Shem is the Yemei Purim la'ois olam la'yikares. That Megilah is the ois. According to our Gemara, the ois is the Yemei Purim, right? And the V'hoyal Hashem l'Shem is the Megilas Esther. According to the Yaakov, V'hoyal Hashem l'ois is the Yemei Purim, l'Shem is the Yemei Purim, and the ois is the Megillah, right? Okay. So remember, this I mentioned to you before, but I'm going to tell you something. The Chiddush is that if it wouldn't be worthwhile for you, I wouldn't be amazed to keep you the other 5 minutes. But I think it's worthwhile for you to hear. I mentioned to you before, maybe many years ago, that the Ravad, the Tamim Deim, the Chuvas of the Ravad, that the Ravad was asked if Purim is Chayev and Tefillin or not. Right? So you remember we were talking about it, if Purim is Chayev and Tefillin. Right? Nira Chayev. Right? He says, it's Chayev. But he said, Melocha, we're noag not to do Melocha. Right? Okay. The reason that he added this, that you Chayev, although we're noag not to do Melocha, is to explain that Purim isn't also b'melacha. I'll come to it in a minute. And then he goes on and he says, "V'chol shel moed potem in atfilin, mipnei shehen yemei ois ki yomim tovim." He holds that chol moed is potem from tefillin, right? Agav, here you know that the Kesef Mishnah in Hilchas Tefillin says that chol moed is chayev in tefillin. The Rambam holds that chol moed you put on tefillin. And in Hilchas Tefillin, the Kesef Mishnah says that the Rambam holds you don't put on Tefillin Chol HaMoed. It's in the Be'hetiv. The Be'hetiv brings from a Chuvas Yad Aaron that points out this. He says it's a stira in the Kesef Mishnah. So if there'd be time, we would see it's not a stira at all. But nevertheless, the Kesef Mishnah is two different. One place it says the Rambam holds you do put on Tefillin. One place it says no. Okay, very good. So now, someone evidently from the Gedolei Rishonim, obviously, if he was already corresponding with the Ravad, so he was a somebody, obviously. And he had a havamina that Purim you wouldn't be putting on tefillin, right? And so the Ravad says no. Why? You could and then the Ravad goes on to the minig of not doing melacha. Okay, we'll see that in a moment. Okay. The Ravad is saying that noagu not to do melacha, okay? Because remember the Gemara says in Daf Hey that at the time that originally Mordechai and Esther wanted that Purim should be Simcha Mishta v'Yom Tov, and it should be a Yom Tov like all Yom Tovim. It should be Asa B'Asiyas Melacha. No, if it would be Asa B'Asiyas Melacha, then you wouldn't put on tefillin. You understand? You wouldn't put on tefillin, right? But the Gemara says that Yom Tov lo kibla layo. They Klal Yisrael, because it was a Gezeira Shein Rov Atzibi Yachol Lamad. They weren't mekabel not to do melacha. So Mamele you chayiv in tefillin, right? Okay, fine. That's why the Ravad, after saying that chayiv in tefillin, he says not doing melacha isn't an isser. It's only a minig. Because it were it an isser, then you wouldn't. Then it would be like Shabbos and Yom Tov. At least with the Rabbanan, you wouldn't be allowed to put on tefillin, right? Okay, fine. Like he says, Tisha B'Av, you're not supposed to put on tefillin. Okay? Okay. But then the rabbi says, okay, now, we have another, now, according to the Girsa of the Ein Yaakov, however, according to the Girsa, why did the Chazal reject the Girsa of the Ein Yaakov? The Gemara reject, where the Ein Yaakov says that V'hoyal Hashem l'Shem is Yemei Purim and Ois Olam is the Megillah. Hepech from the Gemara, because the Gemara says Shem is the Megillah and Ois Olam is the Yemei Purim, which they weren't, which had they been Mekabel as a Yontav, you wouldn't put on Tefillin. But anyway, they weren't Mekabel, so it doesn't interfere with the Tefillin. If, however, according to the Girsa of the Ein Yaakov, that V'hoyal Hashem l'Shem is the Yemei Purim and Ois Olam lo Yikares, if Ois Olam, if the Ois would be the Megillah, we read the Megillah, then there wouldn't be Tefillin Purim. Because the Megillah would be an ois, it's not less of an ois than matzah on Chol HaMoed, or the sukkah on Chol HaMoed, or the yontav of the Shabbos, right? So Mamela, the Gemara, they rejected the Girsa of the Ein Yaakov, that ois olam refers to Megillah, because if the Kriyas HaMegillah, which is noig today, as it always was, if the Kriyas HaMegillah was the ois, then Bizman Hazeh, you wouldn't put on Tefillin Purim, right? But since we say that no, Hashem l'Shem is Mikra Megillah, and Ois Olam was the Yemei Purim, and anyway they weren't Mekabel the Melacha, so it's not really an Ois anymore, right? So we put on, but according to the Ein Yaakov, right, you wouldn't put on Tefillin, right? You wouldn't put on Tefillin Chol HaMoed, because according to the Ein Yaakov, the Ois Olam is the Tefillin. It's an ois. You can't have two oises like Yontav Shabbos, right? Okay. Now, this is the end. My Rebbe used to say the plane is landing, not crash landing, but landing. Okay. One v'ro kol ha'amay haaretz kishem Hashem nikra lecha v'yara mimeka. This is the Tefillin Sheberosh, right? Okay. Rabbi Yehuda says that Vikar is Tefillin, right? No. So, we ask a good question. How did someone make the mistake of asking the Raivad if you can put on Tefillin or not on Purim, if Rabbi Yehuda Dashan Vikar is Tefillin? And that's why the Ramah says that we don't take the Tefillin off until after the Mikra Megillah, because Vikar is Tefillin. Out of a simcha v'sos vikar, they have to keep till after the Megillah. So how could anyone think not to put on tefillin on Purim if it says like Yehuda so out of a simcha v'sos vikar, right? Okay. This goes again to the Girsa of the Ein Yaakov. Rebbe Lozer Hagodol was the one that dashed that V'ro kol ha'amay haaretz kishem Hashem nikra lecha v'yara mimeka, that's the Tefillin Sheberosh, right? Okay? Rabbi Yehuda, the Amora, who was generations later, Rabbi Yehuda was a Talmud of Rav and Shmuel, he said Vikar is Tefillin, right? He said that Vikar is Tefillin. Okay. Why did he say that Vikar is Tefillin? Because he had he was mesupik in the nusach of the Gemara, the nusach of the Ein Yaakov, because that's already from Reb Shmuel Bar Nachmani, who was much before him. That Rabbi Yehuda said this way: if the correct girsa is V'hoyal Hashem l'Shem is Yemei Purim and Ois Olam lo Yikares, then the Megillah is an Ois. Then you wouldn't put on Tefillin on Purim. You wouldn't be allowed to put on Tefillin on Purim because it's an oath. Then you couldn't dash and Vikar as Tefillin, right? Because the Megillah is an oath, and that negates the Tefillin, right? But he says now that they came to the conclusion that the correct girsa is V'hoyal Hashem l'Shem is Mikra Megillah, and the Ois Olam lo Yikares is the Yemei Purim, the Yontav, which they weren't Makabel anyway. So now you can dash and that the Megillah isn't an os, it's a mitzvah, it's Esther, Medivrei Neviim, Mekabbalah, but it's not an os, and Memele you can put on Tefillin, so I can dash and Vikar is Tefillin, right? Okay? Very good, okay? Very good, okay. So he made this conclusion. In other words, he said, if you're going to die, if you're going to be Goris like the Yaakov, that Oisolam is the Megilas Esther, then I can't dash Vikar because you can't put on tefillin. The Megillah is the os, right? But if you dash and that Vayol Hashem L'Shem is the Mikra Megillah, and the os is only the yontiv which they weren't makabel, then you put on the tefillin. How was he machriya this? How was he machriya this? No, how was he machriya? And the memele he dashed into Yakaras tefillin. How was he machriya? Which girsa is right? Okay, how was he machriya? Okay. So here the Ateres Zekenu. The Ateres Zekenu was in Siman Lamed, was a Talmud of the Bach, and he brings from the Marshal and the Smag, and they actually bring from Rabbeinu Bechaya that what is V'ro Kolame Haaretz Kishem Hashem Nikra Lecha? It's the tefillin sheberosh. What aspect of the tefillin sheberosh is the Shem Hashem Nikra Lecha? So he says that what is that? He says that's the shin, the shin of three, headed shin and the four-headed shin. And that's what Rashi says in Shabbos, that the shin Daled Yud is the Shem Havaya, right? So what is the Shem Havaya in the tefillin sheberosh V'ro Kol Amei Haaretz Kishem Hashem Nikra Lecha? It's the shin, right? Okay, it's the shin. Zokter Rabbeinu Bechaya, that what is the misper of shin? Shin is 300, right? Shin is 300. Okay, how many days are there in the year? 365. How many Shabbos are there? 52. Okay, so there are 52 Shabbos that you don't put on tefillin, and there are 13 Yom Tovim, okay, which is a total of 65. It leaves 300 days that you put on tefillin, right? So what does that mean? If there are 300 days that you put on tefillin, it means the Rabbeinu Bechaya holds, and the Bashal says, Cholamod, you have to put on tefillin because it's 300 days. If you have to put on tefillin 300 days, Purim, you also have to put on tefillin. So if you have a remez minat Torah v'V'ro Kol Amei Haaretz, the shin, and the shin is meramez the 300 days, that means Purim, you chayev in tefillin. That means the gears of the Ein Yaakov isn't right because since we know from the shin, the remez of the shin is the 300 days, and you have to put on tefillin on Purim because it's of the 300 days, right? So it means that Ois Olam can't be Mikra Megillah, because if it would be Mikra Megillah, you would be missing one day that you couldn't put on tefillin. Since the shin is the 300 days in which you put on tefillin, that includes Purim. So what must it mean? It must mean that the Ois Olam is not the Megillah, but it's rather the Yemei Purim. And Memela, there's no reason that you can't put on tefillin because there's no ois that would prevent you. The Megillah isn't an ois, and the Melacha, they weren't mekabel, so Memela you put on tefillin, right? Okay? So Memela, since he saw V'ro Kol Amei Haaretz Kishem Hashem Nikra Lecha, that's the shin with the Shem Havaya. And the shin indicates the 300 days a year that you put on tefillin, which includes Purim. So it means the Ein Yaakov could not be right, that girsa, and the Ois Olam can't be the Megillah. Otherwise, it would interfere with putting on tefillin, right? Okay? All right? Fine, very good. Now, where did this whole understanding come from? What is Yakar? What is Yakar? Yakar is Yud Kuf Reish. Okay? Kuf Reish is what begematria? 300. Kuf Reish is 100 and 200, and the Yud is Yomim. 300 Yomim you put on tefillin. That's Yakar. What is Yakar? Yakar is Yud. Yomim, how many? Kuf Reish is 300. In the word Yakar Gufa, we see that you put on tefillin 300 days a year. That means that Purim is included. And that means that it can't be enough. So Memela, he understood that the girsa can't be like the girsa of the Ein Yaakov. And where did he learn it from? That Mikra Mole Diber HaKosav, you understand that it says Yakar, and Yakar is tefillin. Why? Because the tefillin is Yud Yomim, how many? Kuf Reish, 300 days. That's why he put on tefillin. And Memela, the ois has to go on the Yemei Purim, and not on the Mikra Megillah. Rabbi Chananya ben Akasha, Oime, Ratza Kadosh Baruch Hu, will daven Marav, okay? we may need some from Indian. Dr. Zega, ask Bobby for Sidurim. Dr. Sidurim, if you have here, but I'm tired of it. Remember, we have to man sit there, Yagul Taravi, Baruch, do me a favor, I'm going to cook in my hat. This is closet, okay? Naya, Skoya. Come to the